Welcome to the Kynective Media Podcast, and I'm your host, Jules Nadalin. Today, we're tackling a topic many try to avoid, death and taxes. Joining me today is Tara Benham, National Tax Leader, Doane, Grant, and Thornton, to help us understand wills, estate planning, and starting those hard conversations with your family. I hope this podcast gives you the tools to start. Tara, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to have you on the Kynective Media Podcast as a guest. I had the pleasure of attending one of your webinars, and it is as well the topic of our podcast today is something we cannot avoid in life, death and taxes. So welcome, and maybe you can give our listeners a little bit of information about yourself, since I know you, I follow you on LinkedIn, but maybe give them some insights on who you are and why you're here.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, you're right. Death and taxes, the two sureties in life. So a bit about myself. I am the National Tax Leader for Doane, Grant, Thornton. So as part of that, I run the strategic side of Doane's tax practice, but I also practice in tax and have done so for about 30 years. And it really is all about death and taxes. And I do a lot of estate planning and transition planning, anything to do with change, dying, buying, selling. It all involves taxes. And over time, that evolves into strategy, which is really just planning. So that's what I do. It's the charge I get. You know, I call it a story. What are all your parts and pieces? Everybody has the same ones, like Monopoly: houses, cars, trains, automobiles, kids. And it's all a matter of where are they and where do you want to go? So what I do is I walk with everybody and move those parts and pieces around. And it's a lot of fun.
More fun than Monopoly, I'm sure, because
It's like
that
live
game
Monopoly.
is just like, I'm sorry?
It's like live Monopoly.
Live Monopoly. Maybe, hopefully everybody that you're playing with isn't as ruthless as some of my friends I play with.
I hate playing with my one brother-in-law. He just kills me.
Does he just take all your houses and all your money?
Totally. Yeah.
And makes you pay the taxes, because they do have the tax
Absolutely.
card.
Yep.
Absolutely. I love that analogy of Monopoly. I'm going to definitely have to put that in the vault. When I was on your podcast, not your podcast, your webinar, I had a moment of just like, oh, she's talking about something that I kind of went down a rabbit hole on. The generational transfer of wealth that we're seeing right now, it's been something that I've looked into, and you did say $1 trillion transfer of wealth. Am I correct?
Yes.
And I know that's from baby boomers to their children. Do you remember the years that we're looking at that transfer is happening? And I know you love stats. I love stats. Share your stats with me, please. Please give them to me.
And to me, a stat is locked in as a driver of reason as to why, I don't want to be part of that statistic. So yeah, $1 trillion will transfer before the end of 2026. $4 trillion will transfer within the next 10 years. And then if we want to get into a little bit more stats on that, 70% of all Canadians say that having an estate plan, i.e. what we're going to talk about today, death and taxes, that's really important. Only 25% do. And then the other statistic on this is 1 in 10 business owners have a transition plan. So if we think about what that means to the Canadian economy, 76% of the Canadian economy is driven off of privately held businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 1 in 10 have a plan as to what's going to happen in the future. And $4 trillion is going to transfer in the next 10 years. So if you think about the stability of our economy and what that looks like, well, we need a plan, and we need more than 1 in 10 people to do it. So this is, it's about humans and people. And there's lots of people that don't own businesses. They too need estate plans, but it really is, going to impact the foundation. So there's my statistics on everybody. Run to your accountant or your advisor and have a conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you was to take the fear out of doing this, because I feel it's the hard questions that we have to ask ourselves and ask our families. And there's a fear, there's an uncomfortableness. It could be a family situation. When I think about estate planning, I think wills. They're two different things. Am I correct? I think wills are like a part of the estate planning? And do you want to maybe share some information around that and common misconceptions that people may have around the process?
Yeah.
In that planning stage?
So a will is a document that you draft with your lawyer, and it says where your assets go. I own a house, I own a car, I have a portfolio. Where are those going? An estate plan steps back and says, what does my whole life look like? What does my Monopoly game look like? There's more than just houses and trains in that game. There's people, there's relationships, there's all sorts of, sorry, I got some pinging going on. So there's all sorts of things with what are my wishes? What are my desires? What are the family dynamics? And an estate plan looks at all of those things and takes them into account. What are, life insurance? Well, that's not part of the will. And what about the other one? I call them heirloom assets or legacy assets.
Yes, you touched upon that, and that really struck a chord with me, the legacy assets.
Yeah, and a will, everybody focuses on the will and says, what are the things that I have that have value and I have to deal with? Well, there's monetary value and there's everything else.
Yeah, the emotional value.
And the estate plan takes the whole thing into account.
So it's literally going to be a roadmap.
Yeah.
On what that individual's living wishes are, would you say?
Yeah, I would definitely say, and it's like for me, it's walking down the road of if you died today, what would that look like? Do we like the results? And if we don't, let's change it. And also, it's as much the estate plan is. It's about the communication of what's going on as well. I've had many scenarios where families are very angry with the people that have passed away because they didn't have a conversation. And that's part of the plan is, should we have a conversation? Do you want to have a conversation? Do you think this person knows what you're thinking and planning? And I mean, you get even down to the minutia of, what's a password for all of your accounts?
Right.
Like Facebook will not shut down your account if you don't have a password.
Exactly. And you're just going back to what you were saying, where people aren't having those discussions with their beneficiary. I'm a stats kind of girl too. I read a report somewhere where like 12% of people don't even plan to talk about it. So in your professionalism, like, how do you start those conversations around money, death, legacy items, passwords to your LinkedIn, your subscriptions on Amazon? Like, do you have any practical tips on opening that door and starting those conversations to build clarity with your family and taking the fear out of it?
Yeah, I do. And the health agreements and all those other sorts of things are really like, if you become disabled, what does that look like? Who's going to manage your money? But I mean, one of the things that I do is that, so I speak to a lot of our clients on an annual basis.
Okay.
And so when I do, like, I'm privately held businesses more where I deal with. And so I always deal with their personal tax returns and we meet.
Right.
One of the questions that I ask is, and I don't try to remember, when I was younger, I tried to remember if they had a will, and that starts the conversation. And so I'd write in the file, do they have a will? It just became too much work. So what I then got, because like, who can keep track? And so I then started saying, I'm not even going to try to keep track. Every year when we go through this annual kind of meeting, I'm going to say, do you have a will? And if you say yes, I'm going to say, are you comfortable with it? And that starts the conversation. So I guess from what should people do, there should be a pattern. Like, that's my pattern, and that's because I happen to have an annual meeting. But from anybody, it's, what does my pattern look like? And how do I manage and flow into it? But for me, that really is a gateway. It opens the conversation. Do you have a will? Yes, no. Are you comfortable with it? Well, what does that mean? How do you feel about that? And it's interesting because with that conversation, a lot of my clients come back and who've said no, or they're not comfortable with it. And they said, well, we've been talking about this. We were talking about it 6 months ago. And when we go back and see Tara, we don't want to be on her naughty list.
don't want to get the wrist slap for not.
And
not
it's
staying on
really
top
funny,
of
but
it.
so that is one of the ways that I have that conversation. But really, the other way that when I'm speaking to our business clients is, what is your plan? There isn't a meeting that I don't pose that question. What does the future look like? It doesn't matter how old you are. You still need to have a plan because you never know what is going to happen. And I find that also opens the conversation with not just, okay, well, next year I'm going to open another store. It's great. What's the long-term plan look like? Do you have a will? What does it? So I'm constantly bringing in the personal and the kind of business side, if they own a business, to that conversation. And it really, all it takes is a couple of questions.
Right.
And so it's, as a professional, a banker, accountant, insurance, or just an individual themselves, have I asked myself these questions? Do I, should I be asking them? And the answer, of course, is yes.
Yes. And I'm assuming that maybe every year you have to reassess that thing, the will and your estate plan, because things change in life. You may let go of a property, or the shift in your planning in your business. You've closed some doors as opposed to open them. So again, that should be an annual conversation for all families. Yeah, I guess.
I think so. And to me, that would be where my question is, are you still comfortable with it? And that's the same, it pivots into, actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. I'm thinking of selling the cottage, or one of my children is getting a divorce, or I remarried. So basically, it's anything to do with change should trigger a revisit and a conversation related to your plan, because does your plan still fit based on your new fact pattern?
Right. You said, and I thought about something you just said, just sort of was like a thought bubble in my head. And sometimes we don't get along with all our families, and there's like Uncle Bob might be difficult. I don't know where Uncle Bob came from. So do you have to plan for that too? The dynamics of different personalities or people involved in your estate and your will, and how the family's going to manage that at a later date.
100%. Yeah. And I say it over and over and over again. My objective as an advisor is, I want your family to be able to have a turkey dinner, or your collective to be able to have a turkey dinner together after this is done.
Right.
And so it's all about, what does that communication look like? Who are the players in there? I'm always looking for the Uncle Bob who says, I'm not comfortable with that. And it's interesting, as an advisor, what I enter the room with is, I say, I play the devil. Because I've seen the
devil's advocate.
Absolutely. And I play the bad. I've seen the worst kind of stories unfold. I've seen the best stories unfold as well. But when I'm in the room with them, so say we've got a husband and a second wife, and I play the devil where I say, okay, great. Husband says, I'm going to leave everything to my wife, but husband has 2 children from a previous marriage. And I say, great, you leave everything to your second wife. She can change her will and skip your children altogether. And the way that I always frame it is, she would never do that. However, there are people who can influence her. Let's pretend that somebody is influencing her. How do you feel about that? And I flip it around to the wife and say, same thing for you. And so I bring that negativity and that negative conversation into the room, where they have to think about it, but they're not the ones introducing it, because there is always something that can and should be discussed. Well, or even just discussing that and what does it look like? Have we contemplated? Are we comfortable with it? You need to have that conversation. Do you think that somebody will challenge your will? That is I ask that question over and over and over again. And it's, oh yeah, I think so-and-so might have, that's where we talk to the lawyers as well. And the plan needs to involve all of them. And there's a whole bunch of structuring that we can do, which will essentially allow a person to have their wishes endure without those legal challenges. And so that's the dialogue that needs to happen earlier versus later, if And the more complicated your family network gets, the more likely it is for some of those things to happen.
When we've moved on, and unfortunately, there's been a passing of life, and we're looking at probating wills and things. The first thing that comes to mind is part of the planning is cash flow, access to funds, are filing taxes. Do you have any advice to share with the listeners of as part of the planning stage, like how can they minimize their taxes? How can they prepare for cash flow? Are there steps that they need to take, or any advice you can share with them when they're having those conversations?
Yeah. And I think the first thing, then, people don't really realize it, is when you pass away, and when a husband and wife pass away, assuming the assets go from husband to wife, there is no tax. But in all other cases, so let's say the final of two spouses passes away, or there is a deemed disposition at fair market value of everything you own. So you're deemed to sell everything. And now if you think about it, you've got whatever you own, the tax will be triggered at that point in time. There may not be cash flow available for that. So that is one of the things. And you bring that into a room with everybody and they say, oh, I didn't realize that happens. So it does. So let's say you own a $1 million property, or you have a property and it has $1 million gain on it. It's not your principal residence. Well, there's a $260,000 in BC, a $260,000 cash call coming.
Wow.
And that cash call is coming April 30th there's just a few dates that might change it, but in general, it's April 30th of the year following. So there's one of the things that I do really regularly is basically just, let's pretend you passed away today. And we add up all of the assets, and it's really nice because it's a great way to get an inventory from somebody. So give me a list of all of your assets. What does the tax impact of that look like? Let's pretend that you died today. Great, how much it is. I extend the spreadsheet with who are those assets going to? So now what we have is at the bottom, we've got kind of what is this cash call going to look like, but also where are the assets going to go? So we can start talking about the plan, and does this fit? Is this what you were intending? Are there specific assets that need to go from one person to another? If so, what does that do for I want each of my 3 children to get in third equally, but I want this one to get that specifically. So there's that cash call, which we need to plan for, and knowing that we might want life insurance, or I've got lots of investments, that's okay. I had one scenario where grandma passed away and she owned 2 primary assets. One was the family cottage that, of course, everybody went to and communed, and you just showed up and put your food in the freezer or whatever, and everybody ate together. And the other thing was a raw piece of land on the highway. Grandma passes away, nobody has planned, and they need a whole bunch of money to pay the taxes. So, of course, both pieces of property have to be put on the block. And which one do you think went first?
The
cottage went
that
first.
Just broke my heart.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing where you go, if grandma had just planned for this, she didn't need that raw piece of land.
No.
Why didn't you sell it, or plan for a mortgage, or buy life insurance, or something like that? So that's the macro tax, big cash call planning. There's the micro as well, and that is, as you said, there's probate. So in many provinces, all of the bank accounts and everything are frozen until the courts release them, because what they need to do is essentially read the will, make sure that who's supposed to be having control of these assets does. So bank accounts are frozen. So now if you think about it, the individual has passed away. We'd like to have a service. We would like to, do those final kind of blessings and perhaps cremated or whatever. In general, it costs like $10,000. Well, where are you going to get the $10,000 when the bank accounts are frozen? So there's many scenarios where the executor of the estate just is forced, if they have the wherewithal, to actually come up with those funds, and then wait 4 to 6 months for probate so that they can have access to it. Sometimes the banks let you get into the bank accounts, but not all the time.
Is it a good idea to have maybe a joint account with someone who's, for example, I have a joint account with my father to manage his funds, and the thought process behind that was it gives us access to money in case of an emergency. Is that something that works within, like, it doesn't gatekeep you when you're in probate, that you can still have access to that money?
Yeah. So that bank account in that scenario, it skips the will and it goes straight to you. So now, in essence, it is your money.
Okay.
Or an investment account or whatever it is. There's things to watch for that. So yes, you now have access to all of the money in that bank account. And legally it is yours. But what about if you have two other siblings and there's $300,000 in that bank account? Bringing the devil into the room, I have seen scenarios where you scooped all 300,000, even though dad wanted the other two kids to have a portion of it. So when you put names on joint accounts or on title to houses, you really need to be clear of what your intention is and make sure that that intention is documented, because otherwise you can basically watch assets go places where you might not have thought that they should have gone, or you'd, oh, dad probably really didn't mean that.
Right.
Life insurance is another good example of that. I had one scenario where it was three siblings, and the one sister was named on the life insurance as a beneficiary. She was also named in the RRSP. And then there was also a house. So three siblings, he has no children. He passes away. And so the house is sold, and the life insurance went to the sister, and the RRSP went to the sister. She gave the RRSP and said, here, I'm going to share this three ways. But the life insurance, she's like, no, I think I want to keep all of that. It's not clear that the brother didn't want me to have it. And then the house was split all three ways. But if I had to guess, that's not what the brother wanted. And that's really what it was a guess. So that's where it's really easy to say, let's just put so-and-so on that account just for access and so that we've got the cash. But you really need to be clear.
And that would be defined in the estate planning and the will, the details.
Yeah.
So
well,
the minutiae of those little things.
Minutiae of that. And the lawyer, essentially, in a scenario like that, they would draft a trust agreement, and it would say, well, this isn't Jules's money. She's holding it in trust, or, it is meant for this. And now it's clear. That being said, because Uncle Bob might come in and say, oh, no, that's all my money.
He's past go. He wants the $200. In building that solid plan and that roadmap that we've been talking about, who else to involve outside of individuals like yourself? Obviously, lawyers are, I'm assuming, financial planners. Are there any other professionals that you really want to have in your back pocket?
I would say that those are the three keys: is the financial planners. Banks are a fabulous resource for this, the accountants, and the lawyers. And then there's a certification called a FEA, and there are family enterprise advisors, and they specifically have training to blend all of this. So they are an excellent resource as well. FEAs live in all banking, insurance, advisory, lawyers worlds. So we all can play in that field. But it really, I would say it's the lawyers, the bank, so the financial advisors at the banks, and the accountants who are there. From my side of things, I've been specializing in tax for almost 30 years now. And so it's a world that I play in a lot, because tax is triggered by change. So I've been playing with change, which then, kind of expands that out to, well, how do you advise on change? How do you walk the road with people on change? And the kind of the empathetic conversation broadens the more gray hair you get. So you could just limit it down to, I don't want an accountant, I want a tax person. But at the same time, there's many, many advisors out there. It's really anybody who's willing to engage in the conversation, but also anybody who asks the kind of questions like what we're doing to trigger the conversation.
Okay. And those conversations should start early on. They should not be at the last minute when have those conversations with your accountants, your lawyers, your financial planners.
Yeah, it's an awful thing to say, but there are buses out there. It,
Buses?
meaning you can get hit by a bus at any point in time.
That one just flew right over my head.
Totally
Exactly.
right over you.
Yeah,
I've been
'cause
told that that's a very morbid analogy and I shouldn't use it,
it's
but it
fine.
really does work.
No, but it's true. I mean, you got to practice gratitude every day when you open your eyes before you close them. Because we know when we're going to pay our taxes, but we don't know when the Grim Reaper's coming knocking.
No, and we hope it isn't. And not only that, and I guess from my side of things, when I'm talking to people about this, and the depth of conversation changes and differs, but in my world, no conversation is ever a bad one. You have the conversation, and like if somebody says, I have a will and I'm comfortable, great. Maybe we should just revisit this conversation for 15, 20 minutes or whatever it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Once we've had talked about it and our plan is solid, we do not have any change that's needed. There's value in knowing that you've revisited it and there is no change. And I personally think that conversation should be had annually. And whenever there's a change in your situation, it should happen at that point in time. And I'm not even just talking about the individual situation. Well, I have a daughter. She's considering getting married. Well, that's a change.
Mm-hmm.
And does that impact what I've planned? And there's lots of people who are a little concerned about assets going, outside of the net when there's marriages and children and divorces and all these other sorts of things.
I know I have a will, and I think I started having a will when I had my business way back in the late 90s. And I definitely updated my will when I had a daughter. But I remember some stats you shared on the webinar around how many people don't have wills. I don't know if you have that information off the top of your head.
So let's see.
The percentages shocked me. The percentages actually shocked me. So
it was.
Do you want to share that with everybody?
Yeah. Canadians with no will. So under the age of 35, 75%. So only 25% of the Canadians under the age of 35. And then we get up to 65% or 65 years old. 15% of people over the age of 65 do not have a will. So 85% do. That is good, but they're probably not current. And as we go younger and younger, basically at 35 to 44, 69% of them do not have a will. So it's the feeling of invincibility, and you have to have a plan. What does that look like? And interesting, when you were talking about you have a will, I was contemplating this myself. One of my colleagues, actually on the webinar that you were on, she talked about the book that she has. She's extremely organized, and she has a binder for her children, and it's called,
remember the binder.
Yeah, and on the front of her binder it says, "I'm sorry I died." That is what the binder's called. Or "I'm sorry I'm dead." And within that binder, she has a list of all of the assets. She has a list of the legacy assets that her life insurance policy, her passwords for all of her accounts, all of everything that you think a person might need. And so that is the epitome of it. And she said, we're doing the 80-20 rule, which is get what's needs in the binder now, and I'll get the rest of it there later. So I'm reflecting on this conversation coming up, and I'm like, that is a really good idea.
That is an amazing piece of advice. I mean, my daughter, we're a little dark. She's like, "Mom, when you pass on, all I want is your cookbook. I need all your recipes." And I'm like, okay, maybe it needs to be, "I'm sorry I died. Here's all my passwords. Here's the life insurance. Here's the will, but here are the recipes too."
Totally. Yeah. Well, and do you know where your will is in your house?
I do. I've showed her where it is.
Oh, okay. Because I was reflecting on mine, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's in that filing cabinet right there. And I'm like, I'm sure they'll find it. But is it labeled?
No, it isn't labeled. It isn't labeled. And I've probably moved it. So thank you for the reminder. She's coming to visit me on the weekend. I'll be like, okay. And she hates when I do. I'm like, here's my will. Here is the life. And she's like, Mom, you're not going to die. I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't plan on it. But like you said, there may be a bus. You never know.
Totally.
So
And it is
let's
more than just the will and the life insurance. It's that whole contemplation of it. And quite honestly, if we think about that cookbook, that might be one of your legacy assets. And
definitely
people might fight over that. I had one client and he had a clock. And this clock had come from Europe with his great-great-grandfather, and it was just this amazing memory. And he's like, this is the asset that has zero value, but I know everybody's going to want it. And
there's going to be some arm wrestling.
Yeah, and he had two children who didn't get along. And one of them who he felt was going to not only want the clock, but challenge the will. And so he went home and he gave the clock to the one daughter that he wanted to have the clock, like pre-mortem, because he's like, I don't want anybody to fight about this. So he just didn't want to name it in the will. He literally said, nope, this is where the clock is going, and it's gone now already. Whereas other individuals, they want to set that aside in their will. And that's just clarity on who should get, who I want to get what.
Okay. I'm going to start thinking about if outside of the cookbook, which is actually, funny enough, a legacy asset because it was my mother's. So it's the generational cookbook now.
I want that cookbook too.
I'll send you some recipes offline because she was a great cook, and I covet it. It's the food Bible. Tara, do you have one last piece of advice to share that maybe we hadn't covered with any of our listeners or viewers today? Putting you in the hot seat.
Putting me in the hot seat. Well, I guess one thing that we haven't shared, so my quick one that we kind of have shared is start now. You have to have something. Do the 80-20. Just get done what you can, but you really need to have that conversation. But the other one that we haven't talked about before, and it kind of relates to the starting now, is keep records. So, for instance, I can't count on my fingers anymore how many times it's, oh yeah, mom and dad they had their house, but then they bought a cottage. That cottage, they bought it in 1962. And then they did this and they renovated and they did that and they did this and well, the gain on that cottage is taxable. And what they spent on it is the cost base, and that reduces the gain. So remember that people can't ask you questions when you're dead.
Right.
And this is where all of the things, and that's where us doing kind of if you were dead, what would your tax bill look like? What that forces you to do is find that cottage in the background and go, okay, great. You bought it in 1962. When did you move into it? Did you renovate it? Did you put $300,000 into it?
Did you put new windows?
Did you put new windows in? Did you build a fence? All of these sorts of things. How much did all that cost? Because for every $10,000 of costs that you remember, well, that's going to reduce your final tax bill by, in BC, $2,600. And nobody but you knows that you built that fence and is going to remember it. And how much proof do you need? Ideally, you need receipts. But at the same time, the organic anecdotal list is often good enough. So keeping, think about all the things that everybody is going to have to go through when you pass away. And have you got the records for that?
And are they labeled?
And are they?
Thank you so much for all this wonderful information. And
you're welcome.
I really hope I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people, even though they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about this.
You never do. It's the ostrich syndrome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Stick your head in the sand and just avoid it because it's easier. Not the best step to take in life. If people want to stay connected with you or find out more about your webinars or any information, I know you're on LinkedIn. Are there ways they can connect with you? And of course, we'll put this in the show notes because we don't want people sitting there running to get a pen and write it down. But do you want to share the best way to find out more about what you do and what your company does?
I think it would be our website.
Your website?
That would be, yeah.
Okay.
So that would be Doane, and so connect with me. Happy to connect with me on LinkedIn, or just go to the Doane Grant Thornton website. And we always have I personally think it's really interesting stuff that we put there. We try to be practical. And what does this mean to you? But really, nothing beats talking to a person. So reach out and find an individual. We have almost 100 offices across the country. So if you want to have a conversation, we have somebody who you can have that conversation with. And it is hard to talk about death. So you just got to take the leap.
Let's get that conversation started. So log on to their website, ask those questions with your family, and then, get an in-person conversation going to get that planning done. Thank you again so much. And it's been a pleasure.
Welcome. Yeah, you too. Thank you.
A big thank you to Tara Benham for sharing all her insights on planning for death and taxes. I hope you found this helpful. Maybe even share it with someone you care. Thanks for listening. And as always, stay curious, stay connected, and keep telling the stories that matter.